Welcome to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am Dr. Christopher Holmes, host for this episode and member of the Black Doctoral Network. Today, I am joined by Dr. Lucetry Dalton, who is a clinical psychologist, professor, athlete, author, and super overall rock star. This is going to be a great interview. Welcome, Dr. Dalton.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, I'm so excited for you to join me today. So let's just get right into the interview. Will you please tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about your background? Where does it all begin for you?
Well, as far as my involvement in the field of psychology, I would probably say it began when I was 11 years old. I was very involved in my church, and when I turned 11, our church nursery supervisor asked my mom if I could work in the nursery and help her out. Because I think at that time she was maybe supervising 30 plus kids who are parents were members of the church. So she asked if I'd come in and help her out, and just being surrounded by so many different church kids. I think that tells you a lot already, but just learning how their little minds think and view the world, and just being surrounded by them every Sunday for those few hours, I definitely gained what my mama called becoming a child whisperer. And just even with my friendships, and I was always kind of the one people turn to just to help them see a different side of things. So kind of fast forward, when I was applying to college, my mom was very involved in my educational development. So we were sitting there kind of going through the different majors. And she said, what do you think you should major in? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think I should major in? So she said, well, you love talking to people. People seem to be very receptive to you. Let's try psychology. And I was like, sure, I trust my mom's judgment. So whatever she said, I was like, all right, that's cool. We'll try it. I'll go with it. Get to college, fell in love with my psychology courses. So my mom, at least she knows she's talking about. Wow. Fell in love with my psychology courses. And then immediately, I knew just from talking to my professors and doing my own research that it was something I wanted to pursue a doctorate degree in. One, because that's honestly how the best way to make money in this field. But also I knew it would give me the level of prestige that I would need to kind of accomplish in anything that I wanted to do in the world. Mm-hmm. As a young Black woman, you got to have those 3 letters after your name.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm getting my doctorate. So my senior year of college, applied to grad schools, got into a doctoral program, went straight into a doctoral program immediately following my undergrad graduation. Finished that in 5 years, decided to do a fellowship, which brought me back home to Michigan 10 years later, surprisingly, because I never saw myself coming back to Michigan.
Wow.
And that fellowship was one that was so rigorous, but I learned so much. Like, up until that point, I never felt ready as an independently practicing psychologist. I did that fellowship and they make sure you're ready. So I made the choice to stay here, and then I got this job opportunity with Premise Health in Detroit. And here I am.
Wow. So fast track straight through 10 years of continuous work, striving and grinding it out.
Grinding is an understatement. Yeah.
And here you are, 21 years old, doing it. 21, she's a baby, guys.
21 plus a few years.
Yeah, she would say not. She just looks very young. She looks like a baby, y'all. So let's talk a little bit deeper about this field of psychology. Are you, in the work that you've done so far, are you finding certain themes that surface as it relates to specific groups, like races of people or class or gender?
I would definitely say so. And probably because of the times we're living in, it's definitely becoming more apparent and talked about, specifically, by people I work with, not only as my patients, but even coworkers.
Wow.
And in my personal life, just day-to-day conversations with colleagues and friends. But just for a few examples, the angry Black woman stereotype comes up a lot with my African-American female patients who work in corporate America, where they feel they have to behave a certain way, react a certain way that has to be different from those who are not of color in order to not be perceived as the angry Black woman.
Right.
So that comes up a lot in sessions. To speak more specifically about my job, I'm a psychologist we're contracted with Quicken Loans in Detroit, Michigan, which has over 18,000 employees. So I'm one of 3 psychologists here working with those 18,000 employees. It's a very diverse company. And I think with this introduction of mental health as part of the company, like, a lot of people are seeking these services that would not have done it beforehand. So I am introduced to people of different backgrounds, different ages, who talk about, not only their generational experiences with racism, classism, genderism, sexism, but just them opening up about their mental health is, I consider it brave, just because that's something that is, mental health is something that's only now becoming accepted. So, even from my people of color patients, they struggle with that privilege and that white fragility, and they're being open in therapy about that and how to best deal with that. And, what can I do to be an ally in the appropriate, effective way without it coming off wrong? My young Black males, I definitely, give it up to them for coming to therapy. The theme around them is the struggles of being a Black man in America.
Wow.
And I have so many young Black male patients, both, athletes and non-athletes alike, who kind of present with those same similar challenges, regardless of their job, regardless of, their upbringing. It simply comes down to, I'm a Black man in America. There's a target on my back 24/7. How do I deal with that?
Wow. I can only imagine the conversations you've had to have with patients post George Floyd. I mean,
yes.
they were being had already, but that really pushed things to the forefront. People's stress level, but also people's fear level.
Yes.
And so, do you find that young Black men sometimes are not very open to receiving your type of services?
Oh, most definitely. Most of them come to that first session. You can see in their body language, their tone of voice, very reluctant, kind of guarded, held back. And then once we just start, conversing and, I'm asking the questions, seeing things from their point of view, and they say, okay, she seems cool. She seems open to what I really have to say and how I want to say it. Because I tell people, this is your space. We can use it however you want it. You have to curse to get your point across, do it, and then we can work on better ways to express yourself in the general community. But in this session,
just open it up the door.
And they're always apologizing when they say certain words. They're like, I'm sorry, Dr. D, I ain't mean it like that. I said, this is how you need to get it out, do that. And like I said, we'll work on better ways to communicate later. But at first, I need you to get it out the way you need to first.
Well, now you make me think about something else, because you grew up in the church, and we know how church people feel about dealing with their problems, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you work with or deal with individuals that are struggling with trusting God, but also trusting professionals like yourself?
I'm kind of glad you asked that question, just because that is something that has been impactful for me. Being in this field is that, part of what I enjoy about this field is it does give me a platform to educate people on how religion and psychology can work together, and they're not competing entities. Because I grew up in a family where I was told, just pray about it. And, me being in this field, my family, has been more open to seeking out their own mental health services and asking questions and, identifying their own mental health concerns and challenges, because they see me involved in it, how passionate I am about it. And just when I have patients that come and tell me to my face, I was reluctant because, I'm church going, I'm religious, and I feel like I'm going against God by talking to you. My first response is, well, I'm a Christian, and I don't think God would have made me a psychologist if this was something he was against. And they look at me like, okay, touche.
Yeah.
But just even being involved in church, my pastor started a grief and loss support group that I facilitate because of that. And he's becoming more open to mental health and how we can work hand in hand with the church and religion. And I also do Christian counseling as well, when appropriate, for certain patients. And I think because I do have that religious background, it gives them a sense of comfort even more with mental health and psychology.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just know that can be a barrier sometimes for people, because they are conflicted about, I need to turn it over to God, and God would just work it out. But I do believe God gives it to people to help you work through those things as well, with what they're dealing with. So who has had a tremendous impact on you in your career so far?
Definitely my patients, honestly.
Oh, wow.
Just the people I've worked with through my educational training up until this point. I've worked with adolescents, children, adults, geriatric. I worked with people across the lifespan of different backgrounds, races, religion, and just the fact that they give me the opportunity to, have a first class seat to their life. And what I learned from them and what I get from them, and just taking this journey with them, I find it very impactful. specifically with the Black community, as we just kind of spoke about, and, part of what I find impactful is that I'm part of changing this misconception.
Yeah.
I'm part of, changing the perception to mental health in the general society, but specifically with the Black community and, how we were taught to approach our problems. So just my patients being brave enough to sit down and talk to me and share their stories and, me being along this journey with them, I find it so impactful.
Wow. So who do you talk to when you need to get things off your chest?
Let me see. I do peer consultation. So I have a lot of fellow colleagues, we get together and talk about personal stuff, professional stuff. And that's very helpful for me.
Yeah.
Of course, I talk to God because I am a Christian. I try to keep work at work, but I do have a fiance who, he's always interested in hearing my patient stories. Of course, I'm very, I stick to confidentiality.
Right.
But he's very just kind of like, he's just so passionate about my passions. So I definitely spend a lot of time talking to him as well. he loves it.
Now, what about Mama? Now, Mama's the one that put you on this path now.
Mama don't never really ask, but I think she also knows how I am because, again, I'm all about work-life balance. So unless I initiate it, she will leave it alone.
Awesome.
But she can tell when I'm off. Her and my dad, I'm a daddy's girl as well. So they can tell when I'm off, and that's when they'll ask. But when things are good, they're just like, "What's going on? What's new?" And whatever I share is whatever I share. But my mom, she's in the end. She's a mom. They know even when you think they don't know.
Awesome. That's a good mommy.
I have a great mama.
Yeah. So now you're in this field. What is one thing you wish you would have known earlier in your career?
I never know how to answer that question because I'm one that believes that for me, everything happens for a reason in my life, in the way that it's supposed to, on God's time, good and bad. So, what I've experienced and learned along the way in my journey, in my career, in the moment that I learned it, for me, it was perfect timing.
Right.
Like I needed it in that moment to learn it in that moment. Whereas if I would have learned it prematurely, it may not have been as impactful for that moment that it was meant for. But I will say, as both a professor and a mentor, I definitely make a point to be as transparent with my students as ethically possible, because that was something I felt I was lacking at some points in my career trajectory. But also, I definitely am honest about, what aspects along my journey that I found challenging and, things they can look forward to, both bad and good, and how to prepare for them. So maybe if I would have had people in my life that would have done that a lot more often. But again, I still think it wouldn't have made that big of a difference because what I went through, it got me here today. Yeah,
I definitely agree with you in that. So let's say somebody's watching you and they hear about your journey and they know what you're doing. They say, I want to do what she's doing. What advice would you give them?
Never, the worst you can hear from someone is no. And that's kind of been my mantra throughout my entire career in education, is even how I got the job with being part of the directory for the NBA was I reached out to Dr. William Park. So I'm a big athlete fan. I love sports. So I get like CBS notifications about sports, ESPN. So I got a notification on my phone that, hey, the NBA is starting this mental health directory led by Dr. William Parham, blah, blah. So I get on Google, like, okay, who's Dr. William Parham? Like, where he work? What he do? Found his emailed him and said, hey, I came across this article on ESPN.com. This is what I do. These are my interests. What's up? It took him about 6-7 months to get back to me.
Wow.
But he got back to me and said, hey, thank you for reaching out. Here's what we got going on. Here's how you can become involved. A month later, I was signed up and on the directory.
Wow.
So I always tell people, the worst people can say to you is no, or just simply ignore you. Did it get me down for those 7 months I didn't hear from him? I would say not really, because I had so much stuff going on that when he finally did reach out to me, I was like, oh, I forgot about this. Oh my God. So just the importance of networking and just reaching out to people. Like I always say, you never know the struggle behind someone's smile. Mm-hmm. So anytime you meet someone new, be respectful, be positive, because you never know when that person might reach out to you and remember you and say, hey, I have this opportunity. This person might be great for.
Yeah.
And you get that email out of nowhere for that opportunity.
You got to be ready, right?
Got to be ready. Got to be on your toes.
Yeah. So with all of that and the number of people and the different types of people that you counsel, how do you stay abreast on current trends?
Combination of like research, reading empirical studies, going to webinars, conferences, seminars, but also being up on game with media, like different movies that are coming out, different shows, and seeing how I can use what I'm watching to relate to my patients. Because more than likely they're probably watching the same shows. Or even just asking them questions about, hey, you know, what is your perception of the hot topics of psychology right now, of mental health right now? What do you think is going on? So of course, you know, for my own educational professional development, attending webinars and seminars, conferences, doing a lot of reading, research, peer consultation. So mentoring, I learned a lot from my mentees because they're learning psychology at a different time, at a different era.
Right.
And they're probably being more exposed to the new innovative techniques that I didn't learn 10 years ago. So I love mentoring. It's a bi-directional relationship. Like I learned just as much from them as they learned from me. And the same for my patients. They'll say, you know, everybody's Googling. I came across this technique, this intervention on Google. Do you know anything about that? If I don't, I'll be honest, say, no, I don't, but I can research it and get back to it. We can try it out. If I do, then, you know, we start a conversation about it and how they may benefit from it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you talked a little bit about the work you do with players, but you also work with Team USA. You mentioned that the National Activist Care Network, the National Basketball Players Association, as well as players in the NBA. Talk a little bit about why that work with athletes is so important.
Oh, I can talk all day about this one. I think to start, I definitely want to say, I think people forget that athletes are human first, with their own opinions, feelings, emotions, trials, tribulations that for some are completely unrelated to the role as athletes. They have other things going on. They have personal lives. They have families. They have significant others. They have their own internal conflicts that they're dealing with. And then on top of being a public figure in the athletic world, kind of adds to that and kind of amplifies it. So I think, you know, that's part of my goal with athletes is helping them to recognize the human in them. Like you're more than just an athlete. And I think people forget that, you know, yes, they're skilled in their sport or else they wouldn't be a professional athlete, but a lot of them had interests and skills way before they decided to pick a basketball or kick a soccer ball. A lot of them have interest in music, writing, poetry, like just the most random things you wouldn't think an athlete is interested in. So helping them, you know, reintroduce them to the past passions and, you know, helping them maybe develop those in an appropriate way. Trying to think what else. But they typically, it's the same kind of therapy for the most part. You know, like I said, I'm working with a person who just so happens to be an athlete.
Right.
So some specific athlete related things that come up is obviously dealing with the injury. What do I do career wise or life wise after, you know, my life as an athlete is over? During this pandemic, you know, dealing with being in that bubble. Some players decided to go overseas, so making that transition. Trying to think, developing vocational training skills. So a lot of them are in night school.
Wow.
A lot of people don't know that Shaq got an entire doctorate degree while he was in the NBA.
Wow.
Most people don't know. It's Dr. Shaq. Put some respect on his name. You know, so just, you know, helping them think about what other options they have and that, you know, their entire life is not sports. Right. Even though people put that pressure on them, you know, tell them to shut up and play, but, you know, there's more to them than just the sport that they play, which, you know, I think we spend a lot of time in therapy talking about that.
So you kind of mentioned the whole shut up and play topic. And so as it relates to these teams and these owners, is there any place where you feel like they dropped the ball in helping to be responsible for their players, their employees, especially as it relates to their mental health?
I wouldn't go as far as saying necessarily dropping the ball, but more so maybe minimizing or just lack of education or just making it not making it a priority. Right. So I would say, you know, specifically when it comes to social activism, obviously, philanthropy, education, humanism, and most importantly, you know, they're seeing athletes as individuals outside of their sport. I feel like is where some improvement in the athletic world could happen. Because it is unfortunate, like I said, that people forget that athletes are human first with their own individual everything, obligations, emotions, thoughts, feelings. And because of the position they're in, they are faced with the responsibility of expressing and acting on these thoughts and feelings in a more professional manner. I also think it's tough on them because, because they're an athlete with this platform, society wants them to be role models, right? But only in the way society wants them to be, and only in certain aspects of society. So with social activism, Kaepernick took a knee, nonviolent way to be socially active, and what happened? He lost his job, almost lost his career.
Right.
So I feel like that is where there is some area of improvement in the world of sports, is embracing that side of athletes and, having conversations about it. Like coaches, team owners, calling those team meetings, instead of talking about the sport, how is society impacting y'all? How is the internet impacting y'all? What's going through y'all heads? Because my dad was a professional athlete. One thing he always says is he wished they had sports psychologists during the time he played. Because he said, I had so much on my mind while I was playing. That's how I got injured. Because I didn't know how to, I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. So while I'm on the field, I had all these thoughts racing through my head. And next thing you know, I'm on the ground with a blew out knee.
Wow.
So being able to do that with someone, I find is very helpful for these athletes.
And just listen to you talk, this makes me think about, professional athletes. They normally only hear fans in the stands. But now they have social media accounts, and they can hear these attacks through DMs or through tweets or whatever. And that has to have an impact on them, on how they feel about themselves or how people view them.
And it comes down to them feeling pressured, like to be the perfect athlete. So,
right.
But I always tell them, like, honestly, we live in a world that whether you be right or wrong, somebody gonna have something to say, because you cannot please everyone.
Right.
You just can't. And even if you're doing everything right, somebody gonna have something to say and find some wrong in the right that you're doing. So them kind of be accepting that and just, putting their focus and energy on just being true to yourself. Being the best person you can be, being the best athlete you can be, regardless of who it pleases. Because the only person you really need to please is yourself.
Yeah.
So helping them think through that and process their thoughts and feelings about that and just overcoming that. Because not only just with athletes, when you think about students,
yes,
when we were in school, we didn't have to deal with social media, cyberbullying, all this other stuff. Like if you were bullied, it was at school and you were able to come home and escape from it. Now there's no escaping it. So again, athletes are just regular people dealing with things on a more advanced platform. Yeah. But it's no different than a third grader getting bullied at school and having to come home to a social media post about themselves.
Wow. Well, let's keep going with you, because you have done so many things. What has been your biggest accomplishment to date?
That's a hard question too. I would say, of all the things I accomplished, I think just making my family proud and what I've done is my biggest accomplishment.
Oh, wow.
Regardless of what I've done, my dad be able to brag and smile, and my mom just I have her name. So I said, you took a risk naming your daughter after you, because I could have been messed up and that'd have made you look bad. But you just making my parents proud, especially my grandmother. She's the only grandparent I've had. My other grandparents passed either before I was born or right after. And then also just making a name for myself in the way I chose to, and being able to tune out the noise, and I would definitely say my biggest accomplishment is being the exception and not the rule, or even better, defining a new rule.
Wow.
Because if you look at where I came from, I'm from Pontiac, Michigan. So for those who aren't familiar, at one point we were considered the worst city in the country to live in. So me being a young Black female from Pontiac, Michigan, based on the statistics, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be talking to you right now. I'm not supposed to be a doctor.
Wow.
So like I said, being an exception to the rule, but defining a new rule.
So let's talk about this whole defining. So how do you define success? And then what are those skills that you needed to help you get there?
Success for me, and I definitely want to make sure I emphasize this, is an individualized experience. Because I think people have this standardized definition of success and what it's supposed to look like, and that ain't it. For me, success is an individualized experience of accomplishment, authenticity, self-actualization, and pure unconditional happiness with yourself in the life you are choosing to live. For me, that's the best definition of success I can give you.
Wow.
As far as the skills that I felt I needed to be successful in my own way, and I don't think it was just skills, but also just certain personality characteristics as well that helped me to grow these skills. But I would say self-discipline, obviously, determination, finesse. I've given a lot of speeches, and one of my favorite speeches to give is called Finesse to Success. Because I think anyone to be successful, you have to do some finessing, but specifically for Black people, we definitely got to do some finessing.
Yeah.
That's a skill within itself. Prioritizing in both my professional and personal life, networking, as I've mentioned before, having to be fearless and confident, even when I don't have the capacity to be so. Learning when to ask for help. That's self-care. Of course, my faith and spirituality, resiliency, having a cognitive framework that allowed me to focus more on the positives than the negatives has helped me be successful. And then honestly, the biggest thing is giving yourself credit for those small wins.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Not be at the end goal that you want to be at, but you're taking the steps to get there. And sometimes those are some small steps, but give yourself credit for doing that. Because some people ain't even got there yet.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So you mentioned giving speeches, and you had the opportunity to be the commencement speaker at your high school alma mater. Talk a little bit about that and what that meant to you.
What was that, about 3 years ago? That moment was so surreal. I think even the first 6 months after doing it, and people brought it up like, I did that. That was it was very, it happened so fast. It was such a surreal moment. And I think I wanted to stand out to the graduates I was talking to, because I can't remember my commencement speech for any of my graduations. I done graduated a lot. And I can't tell you who a single commencement speaker was. I hope they're not listening to this.
You're going to get the email in a minute.
Like, I was your commencement. Oh, my bad. But so to be somebody standing in front of these students who they can relate to, who is literally from the same city they're from, who sat in the same classrooms they sat in, and likely to experience the same downfalls, criticism, stereotypes, adverse experience that they experience in their own way, and yet to have overcome all of that, to reach a level of success where I was afforded the opportunity to be a commencement speaker. That was a proud moment for me. And I think for the students, it normalized success and greatness in a community that is often looked down upon and that many have low expectations for.
Yeah.
So that's why that meant so much to me, because I wasn't too far removed from graduating from Pontiac Northern when I gave that commencement speech.
Yeah.
I had just celebrated my 10-year class reunion. So I think, for me, I know most of my commencement speakers were of the seasoned age group. So I think me being so young, having such a youthful experience and have accomplished so much, and be so genuine and real in my words and to speak their language, it was a beautiful, unforgettable moment for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you are a woman of many talents, and you wear many hats. How do you balance wearing all of those church hats?
My grandma gonna get you. I would say one of the hardest lessons for me is learning when to say no and how to say no. And then also learning that you can't expect you from other people. That is something that's helped me balance everything. And so of course, setting boundaries with other people and myself. I have OCD tendencies, so I have to be organized and plan ahead with room for flexibility because things come up.
Yeah. So
you have to move some things around and not allowing that disruption in my plans, drive me crazy. But okay, look, this is the reality of the situation. These are the resources I have available to me. How can I move this around and make this work? And if you can't make it work, you can't make it work. You gotta be okay with that.
Yeah.
I believe in self-care Sundays. So I'll go to church, or as of the past year, I'm in Bedside Baptist watching church on Facebook Live. So I do that, and then the rest of the day is whatever I want to do. And be okay with having a lazy day.
Yeah.
Sitting around watching TV. I barely get to watch TV, but on my Sundays, I'm binging something, and you don't leave me alone.
Wow. Wow.
I think being proactive versus reactive has also helped me balance, being able to plan ahead and like, okay, this may possibly happen. So then this is how I respond. Just having some type of plan in motion. No, and recognizing it may not happen that way, but at least you have something to look forward to and plan for.
Well, I do want people to know, and I'm not going to ask you about this, but I do want them to know that you also play volleyball.
Play volleyball.
I mean, I don't know where you're fitting in the time to play adult volleyball, but y'all, she does. She does. I just want y'all to know.
I was coaching it before the pandemic. I was coaching a youth volleyball team at Pontiac Recreation Center 2 days a week, but then the pandemic happened, so that stopped. But I'm hopefully looking forward to getting back to that as well.
Oh, wow. I know that. I used to be a coach. I understand and value the work that a coach does. So once again, I don't know how you're putting it all in there, but you are.
I'll share my calendar. You can see it. It's color coordinated and everything.
So let's just talk a little bit as we get ready to wrap up about how your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network has enhanced your career.
I would definitely say just being able to network and socialize with other Black doctors across many different fields. I'm a psychologist, but obviously there are many different types of doctors. So participating opportunities such as this one has definitely enhanced my career. I expect it to do so. Taking part in a platform that allows for the sharing of the minds. I tend to use that term over arguing or debating, because that's essentially what it is. We're sharing our different perspectives. So I like that it allows for sharing of the minds, and for Black doctors all across the country to commune together and sharing each other's experiences. Because regardless of what your degree is, as far as what specialty it's in, we all kind of had a similar struggle with getting this degree.
Yeah, agreed.
No matter what school you went to, because at the end of the day, one thing we can't change about ourselves is this. And it's the first thing people see.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. That is so true. Well, I thank you so much for joining me today. I'm sure the listeners and the viewers have learned a lot about you, and they're thinking, I need to do something else with my life because I'm not doing enough. She's doing a lot, and I need to add one or two more things to my plate. It has truly been a pleasure. Dr. Dalton, please tell our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the work that you're currently doing.
I would definitely say my LinkedIn probably has the most about me as far as my professional involvements and endeavors. So definitely my LinkedIn is Lucetry Dalton, which I'm the only one on there. I don't think my mom has one. She's retired now, so she definitely shouldn't have one. And then of course my Instagram is Dr. CDB, DRCEETYB as in ball, and the number 8.
Awesome. Well, please be sure to stay connected to the Black Doctoral Network and connect with us on all of our social media channels. Thank you again for joining us today for the Black Doctors Talk podcast. We hope you will join us again next time. But for now, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to tell a friend.